Good afternoon. Basic communication skills. Nowadays, communication plays a very vital role in the life of an individual, trade and commerce. For the growth of expansion, diversification of the business organization and for its success, efficient and effective communication system is very necessary. The term communication is derived from Latin word communis, which means to share in common. Communication is very old term and at early stage of human civilization, communication was made in the form of physical expressions, typical voice signals, codes, indicators, etc., or indications. At the latter stage, signs, symbol, and language are used in communication to create understanding. Philip Morgan and H. Kent Baker claims that the average person remembers only about half of what said during a last 10 minutes conversation and forgets half of the within 48 hours. It is important to note that most people need to improve their listening skill. In the communication process, listening and reading are the receiver's activities and they involve the responsibility of decoding very carefully. The speaker and the writer have the responsibility of encoding carefully. All these four activities are important for managers. However, studies have shown that an executive's time is spent in the following proportion as shown here or as stated below. Writing is about 9% or 10%, reading is also about 16%, speaking about 30%, and listening about 45%. So, listening does not mean just hearing the words of the speaker but trying to get at his full meaning. It is interesting to know what happens the when one listens. Listening is a process involving five activities, that is scenting, interpreting, evaluating, remembering, and responding. Sensing. Sensing means the physical hearing the message and taking note of it. Reception can be blocked by interfering noises, impaired hearing, or one can tune out distractions and focus on registering the message. Interpreting, decoding, and absorbing what one hears, the speaker's frame of reference may be quite different. So, one must try to determine what the speaker really means. Paying the attention to non-verbal communication often increases the accuracy of one's perception. Evaluating, forming an opinion about the meaning, sorting through the speaker's remarks requires a good deal of effort. It is also tempting to dismiss ideas offered by people who are unattractive or abrasive and embrace ideas offered by speaker. Then remembering, storing a message for further reference to retain what one hears, one must take note of or make mental outline of the speaker's key point. And then responding, acknowledging the message by reacting to the speaker in some fashion. Thus, listening requires a mix of physical and mental activities, and it is subject to a mix of physical and mental barriers. Carwell says that all the listening is not at the same level, neither does all listening require the same skill. The first level of listening is to make sense out of sound. This means be able to distinguish the sender's message. Thus is done every day when people read a book while a radio is playing, or when an employee is concentrating at his work while other persons converse nearby or discuss nearby. This level of listening is really closer to awareness than understanding. The second level of listening is when understanding begins. This is where the listener concentrates on what is being said. This is also what semantic difficulties can begin. The third level is to distinguish fact from fancy. This requires evaluation of the part of the listeners and depends on his knowledge, intelligence, and past experience. The fourth level of listening is the highest level and requires the greatest skill and concentration. The highest level of listening involves only not only hearing but the added dimension of empathy on the part of the listener so that he can understand what is said from the speaker's point of view. This is the rarest type of listening, but it is the most important one of understanding. Is to occur and is to overcome the differences in the organizational perspectives. Here, the listening may be of the three to four types, that is, the content listening, critical listening, empathetic listening, and active listening. Where the content listening is to enable one to understand and retain the message, critical listening is to enable one to evaluate the information, empathetic listening is used to draw out what the other person is saying, and active listening it is useful to understand that other person's point of view and resolve the message or the conflict or the situation. Then here this is the part related to the listening, and now we have to see the another aspect of the communication, that is the communication and its limitations. The multi-purpose function of communication in a group or organization are described by Robbins under four heads: control, motivation, emotion, expression, and information. Communication acts to control member behavior in several ways. Organizations have authority, hierarchies, and formal guidelines that employees are required to follow. Communication fosters motivation by clarifying to employees what is to be done, how well they are doing, and what can be done to improve performance. For many employees, their work group is primary source for social interaction. The communication that takes place within the group is fundamental mechanism by which members show their frustrations and feelings of satisfaction. Communication therefore provides a release for emotion, expression, of feeling and for fulfillment of social need. The final function that communication performs relates to its role in facilitating decision making. It provides the information that individuals and group need to make decisions by transmitting the data to identify and evaluate alternative choices. Generally, almost every communication interaction that takes place in a group of organization performs one or more of the functions. Information function. The information function serves to provide knowledge for the guidance of individual in their activities. It also fulfills workers' desires for awareness of things that affect them. The command and the instruction function serves to make the employees aware of this obligation to the formal organization and provide him with the additional guidance on how to perform his duties adequately. This is more or less of a directive nature. Then the influence and the persuasion. This function is also known as motivational function, and it is primarily concerned with the influencing for behaviors and attitudes of the people through persuasion and encouraging them to perform or to exhibit a certain behavior necessarily for achieving organizational objectives. Interrogative, the interrogative function of communication primarily involves the bringing about of interrogative function of communication primarily involves the bringing about the interrelationship leading to unification between activities of individual as a work team toward the achievement of common organizational goals. A principle is a generally accepted rule of action of the communication. Communication plays a large role in organization. It is used to improve productivity, to enhance job satisfaction, to develop mature union relationship or relation to, to create respective climate for innovation, to establish a mutuality of understanding between managers and their employees and community neighbors, and to improve the organization climate in order to achieve these vital communication goals. The managers should be aware of certain principles governing communication, especially in their task of opinion change and attitude change. Managers will find the principle of persuasion very useful. Some principle of persuasion, here principle of drawing conclusion, principle of use of fear, principle of sleeper effect, principle of credibility of communication, effect of known motives, selective exposure, personal involvement, influence of group, and primary. Then here, while dealing with this, we have that there will probably more opinion change in the direction you want if you are specifically state your conclusion that if you let the audience draw their own attention. Sometimes emotional appeals are more influential, sometimes factual. It also depends on the kind of messages and kind of audience. A strong thread is generally less effective than a mild thread in inducing a desired opinion change. More of the desired opinion change may be measurable sometimes after exposure to communication than right after the exposure. There will be more opinion change in the desired direction if the communication has high credibility than if he has low credibility. Communication should be credible, believable, and very important in this case. Suspicion of the motives of the communication may not work against desired opinion change. Here, selective exposure, that is the tendency for people to expose themselves to communication with which they already agree to avoid opposing material. The people you want most in your audience are least likely to be there. Audience participation helps to overcome their resistance to change. A person's opinion and audience are strongly influenced by the group of which he belongs and wants to belong. This person is rewarded for conforming to the standards of the group and punished for deviating from them. In addition, here the principle of primary, it is untold value of the manager to here the first impression have great retentivity communication which anticipates the problem areas or predicts counter communication is the most effective. Importance of primary in opinion change and retention must be recognized. Communication to be effective and purposeful should have information flow in both direction downward as well as upward. There are some of the points remain in the part of the communication. We will continue the same in the next lecture. Okay, thank you, good day.